Hey everyone. So today we are going to be talking about additives in soap making. This question has come actually from one of you as one of the comments on our videos asking that we speak a little bit more about additives in soap making. Now, this is not going to be an exhaustive resource on all additives you could possibly add into your soap. This is going to be the things that we use on a regular basis that we have found to work well in soap making and why we choose to use them, or even in a couple cases why we choose to use them very specifically because just in a very specific way so that it doesn't have a detrimental effect to our soap. So let's talk about additives. Grab your coffee and let's dive in. So first, let's talk about additives kind of in general. Remember that when you are adding something to the soap batter, it has to be able to withstand the saponification process. Remember, we're dealing with a chemical reaction here. The lye it's kind of rough on anything else that you were going to add into the soap batter. So if even after you have your lye, in our case, it's your lye and your goat milk and your oils blended together and you have that kind of like thick milkshake soap batter consistency, that lye is still active. So even if you waited until that point to stir in, something into your soap batter, the lye is still going to react with it. And you have to think about like, what is it going to do? Like what's going to happen to it in that process? And also later on as it's curing, we want to make sure that you don't put something in your soap that's going to rot or mold or discolor or, whatever, because we don't want that thing you added to age badly and then make your soap look funny. So if anything you are thinking about adding to your soap batter, it has to be dry. So you've heard of people adding orange slices or lemon peel or, whatever, all of that stuff has to be like powder dry before you can add it into the soap batter, or it's going to rot, it's going to mold, it's not going to behave well in your soap batter. So I generally shy way away from adding food to my soap. There are some things that I want to add for decoration. There are some things I want to add for the qualities they bring to the soap, like a gritty texture or whatever, but I really try to stay away from adding food. Food tends to not age well, maybe not even look good after the saponification process and not age well in the process. So be very careful before you're adding any kind of food substance. If you're going to try it, remember it has to be dry before you can do that. Now, flour, botanicals, other things like that, again, same thing here. It has to be dry. So if you have flowers that you're picking off of your plants in the yard, they have to be dry. If you're adding, other things that you didn't purchase already dried, they have to be very, very dry. So give them time to dry out before you give that a try. But also remember, flowers in general are going to have a rough time in the soap batter. They tend to discolor. So I also am very cautious about mixing flour material into my soap batter. I tend to just sprinkle it on the top. And even then, sometimes it gets a little discolored. So things that would be most common. Now that being said, we do use some flour material on some of our soaps. And as long as we do it carefully, it usually works out okay. Rose petals, lavender buds, calendula, which is marigold, like marigold petals, chamomile. So those are things that are pretty common, and you can do them as long as you do them carefully. We have had decent success with the marigold, the calendula, and the chamomile in the soap batter. lavender buds turn brown in soap batter. So you'll want to maybe keep them out of the actual batter. You can get away with sprinkling them on top, but even then sometimes they will discolor. So just know what to expect. Don't go overboard on that, and just know that over time they are going to discolor. So just expect that. Rose petals as well you would not want to mix them into your soap batter. Just keep them for on top, and just know what to expect there. So that's kind of my word of caution with botanicals, is just be aware that it's a plant material. It's a delicate kind of material, and that saponification process is going to have an effect on it. So just know that that's going to happen, and know what to expect. Keep it mostly on top, and it should work out okay for you. So these are some of the additives that we really like to use here at Big Red Barn and Sassy Soapers. This is pumice. This is fine grit pumice. We also use some salt sometimes. This is pink sea salt. We have used oatmeal, and this is probably the best one to start with, the colloidal oatmeal. And then we've also used this sorghum wheat flour. The additives that I love more than botanicals and flower petals and things are the ones that add some grit and some texture to your bar. I feel like it really adds a unique property to the bar. It makes it something that people are just going to love using, because lots of people just really love that gritty texture to their bar soap. So these things are, this list of additives are things that we add to the bar for the properties that they bring to the bar. And we've really had some pretty good luck with this list. Now, the first one is pumice. Pumice is kind of like a sandy kind of gray material. You can get it in different grits. We have always used either fine or medium. Remember, when you are adding something to your soap bar for the grittiness that it brings, how it feels on your hands is going to be very different than how that bar feels when you're using it on you anywhere else. So you're going to want to start with a very fine grit and just kind of gradually work up to where you would like it to be. Starting off with the very heavy stuff, you can find that you have added sharp things to your soap. And that's really a little bit of a surprise, I think. I know the first time that I added oats to my soap, it asked for like ground oats. And I thought, well, no problem. I have oats. I have a coffee grinder. No problem. We'll make ground oats. So I did that. And then I sprinkled some that weren't quite as even ground than that on top. And those bars of soap were almost too sharp to use. Those oats are just, they're stronger than you think they will be. So, and it was almost a soap that it was almost unusable because it was so very sharp. So just be aware of that, like how gritty it feels, how sharp those pieces are. It's going to be more in the soap and as you're using it than you might think. So just be aware, start really fine, and then you can always bump up later if you want it to have a little bit extra something to it. So pumice is a great way to start. With any of these, I would say you'll want to start in like a 3-pound batch. Start with 2 or 3 tablespoons of pumice. And this is not like, you can go more than that, but remember, any one of these that you add is going to thicken the batter. It's going to act just like flour, adding flour into a bread dough or something. It's going to keep making it thicker. So the more grit that you add, the more your soap batter is going to accelerate and thicken up on you. So just be aware of that as well. We have also used colloidal oatmeal, which after I ground my own oats, I realized that there was another way to use oatmeal where it's ground super fine. It still adds a good amount of texture and grit to the soap without it being sharp. So if you're wanting to use oatmeal, start with that. Start with the colloidal oatmeal, and that will be a great place to just kind of get a feel for how this goes. Now, one other thing that we have tried that was kind of fun was we have a distributor near us who produces sorghum wheat flour. And we have used that also as a very fine grit in our soap and found that it has worked out pretty well. So that's just another, like in that same vein of adding grit. Those three are kind of like three different levels. I would say the sorghum wheat flour is the least gritty, and then the oatmeal, and then the pumice above that. Now, some other things that we've added for other reasons, we have used activated charcoal. You can add that dry to your soap batter. Remember, it is going to thicken it just a little bit. And remember, activated charcoal is charcoal. So be very careful about, like if you put it dry into your soap batter, you're going to want to take that stick blender and push it underneath the surface of the soap batter. So when you start the stick blender, it doesn't go poof up in your face. Not only is that rough on your clothes and everything else, but you don't want to inhale that and stuff. So push it under the surface of the soap batter before you start to blend. But it makes a really lovely dark black soap that people are really attracted to because they love the detoxing effect of the activated charcoal, which is why we add it to our soaps. Now, we also have added different kinds of clay for different reasons. We've used bentonite clay, some like French green clay, other clays that are different colors. Like there was a purple one, Brazilian clays. That's the word I was looking for. So just some different clays just for the colors that they bring and the properties that they bring to the soap. But we have used kaolin clay very specifically to help set the scent of essential oils. So you just include the kaolin clay, again, that 2 or 3 tablespoons in your 3-pound batch. If you're using essential oils, pay attention. It's a really neat experiment to pay attention. Make one without it and make one with it. And then after they've cured, see which one holds its scent the most. We really feel like the kaolin clay really helps those essential oils present their scent more boldly and make it last longer. So lots of reasons to add these things to your soaps. Let me go through my list and make sure I've got all of them. Yes, I do. So lots of reasons to add these soaps, either for the grittiness, for the detoxing, to help set the scent, all of those things. Just great things to think about as you are designing your next soap batch. One other category of additives is things you add to the soap to make the soap behave differently. And this is specifically sodium lactate or salt of some type. Sodium lactate is a salt as well. And this is added to the soap for the purpose of helping it set up faster and unmold easier. Now, this works very well if you are in a position where you need to make a lot of soap and you need to use your molds again soon. It helps the soap set up at least in 24 hours, maybe just a little bit less than that. So you can unmold the soap at 24 hours, get it cut, wash your mold, and use it again right away the next day. So if you're needing to unmold, or if you have a batch or a recipe that this tends to be a softer bar, this tends to be a little mushy when I try to unmold it, the corners tend to kind of mush in and not be nice and square, then sodium lactate or a salt might be a great additive to that bar just to help you unmold it better and get it cut and get it drying. It doesn't do anything to the soap long term, but it does help you get through that unmolding process, have nice, clean corners, square corners, a nice firm bar to get it on the drying rack so that you can use your molds again. So those are 2 things you can add to your soap just to help it in the way it behaves as far as unmolding goes. Now, there are a couple more things that I want to mention that aren't really additives, but they are things that a lot of people like to see in a soap recipe. And these are just different oils and butters and things. I have seen lots of people really want to get castor oil into their recipe. Our standard recipe does not have it, but they love to, it's just something they want to see in their soap, or shea butter or cocoa butter or other things like that. And it's fine to use all of these, but remember, anytime you are adding something like an oil to your soap recipe, especially if you're wanting to either add it in to the oils that are already in the recipe, or you're trying to swap out an oil that's there, you have to remember 2 things. One, you can't change the oils in a recipe without running the whole recipe through a soap calculator or a lye calculator to refigure the amount of liquid and lye that's needed in that recipe. When you swap out an oil, oils have an SAP number. That number is the amount of oil it takes the amount of lye it takes to react 1 ounce of that oil into soap. And everyone is different. So even if you took, say, the coconut oil out of your recipe and you're going to replace it with something else, even if those amounts are the same, their SAPs are different, and the amount of liquid and the amount of lye they need are different. And if you don't figure that out, you run the risk of having a soap that's very lye short, and it's a real goopy, soft soap that doesn't set up well, or a soap that's lye heavy and now it burns when you use it. So you have to go through and do that calculation. Don't skip that step, and don't assume this is like cooking. And if you don't like strawberry, you can substitute cherry. It doesn't work that way. You have to run everything. Any change you make is a new recipe, and it has to be checked in through a lye calculator or a soap calculator. So that's number 1. Number 2 is to remember that all these oils and butters and things have a recommended usage amount. And that amount is not the same from one to the other. I have had people ask me, in our soap recipe, we have not quite equal amounts of olive oil, coconut, and palm oil. And those are the 3 oils that we use primarily. There's a little more olive oil than the other 2, but you get the idea of what our recipe is. It's just those 3. And palm oil is about a third of the oil there. And they said, well, can I just swap out the palm oil and use shea butter instead? And first of all, no. Palm oil and shea butter do not have the same SAP. You can't just swap them like that. You'd have to run it through a lye calculator or a soap calculator like we were talking about. But also, shea butter is never used in soap in that big of a percentage. It's like the usage rates on palm oil and shea butter are not the same. You would never just swap one out with shea butter. Shea butter is used in very small amounts. It's going to add great things to the bar, but it's going to weigh down that bar. And if you put too much of it in there, you're going to end up with a bar that's real like slimy and heavy and doesn't lather very well. And if you took out the palm oil, then it wouldn't be very hard. It'd be very soft. It would deteriorate quickly. So just know that you need to know if you're going to talk about, and this isn't really additives, but it's like recipe swapping. But I hear this question a lot too. Know that if you're making a change, you have to run it through a soap or lye calculator, and you also need to know the recommended usage amounts, especially if you're dealing with a butter, shea butter, cocoa butter, castor oil even. Know what those recommended usages are so you don't end up creating a recipe that really is not what you intended to create either. So just know those 2 things. Check it with a lye calculator. Know the recommended usages before you start making swaps out of your soap recipe. Another thing to remember, and as you are starting to get excited about your soap making and starting to think about what are all the different things that you could use, all the different things you could include, don't forget that your soap recipe by itself is amazing. Especially, I'm a little partial to goat milk soap, but if you're making a goat milk soap, don't get all hung up on that you have to add other things to make it special or amazing. If you're making a goat milk soap, actually other soaps are fine too. I'll try to ease up on my bias there a little bit, but your soap is amazing just as it is. So don't feel like you always have to be adding pumice or clays or botanicals or fruit or orange slices or whatever it is. Your soap is amazing just as it is, and don't ever discount that in your soap making. And so don't get all hung out to dry on the additives. They're fun to experiment with, but they're also not necessary. Your soap is great just as it is. In our next video, I'm going to show you 2 easy ways to make swirls in your soap batter. This is another question as we've asked people, what would they like us to talk about? Getting swirls in your soap project is one of the top questions that we get. So in our next video, we're going to show you 2 easy ways to get those swirls in your soap batter that doesn't require a lot of extra special anything. It's just going to make really lovely swirls, and it's really not even that difficult. So I'll see you in the next video where we work on some swirled soap making.